Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my channel Crime Uncut. Earlier I made a video about the tragic death of Willem Kruger, and I trust that most of you have seen that video. Since that video I have acquired new information, and I decided to make this follow-up video to share this very important and interesting information with you. But before I start, I want to be very clear that I work on my own. I'm completely independent. No one asked me to make these videos, and I'm certainly not paid for them. Well, most of you already know the background of how Willem Kruger disappeared in the early hours of Sunday, November the 13th, 2022, after attending a stag party, and how his body was found in his truck 9 days later in the bottom of the Vaal River, adjacent to the Hen-based Lodge and Resort in Mpumalanga. Now, I'm aware that there are many of you, including the South African police, that believe that Willem Kruger was the victim of foul play, that he was murdered, and that his truck was placed inside the river on the Monday, the day before he was found on Tuesday, November 22nd, 2022. Now, on December the 23rd, 2023, the police issued the following media statement. And I'm not going to read the whole statement, and I'll put a link to it in the description below. I just want to draw attention to the following parts. It is said that on Monday, November the 14th, 2022, a search continued throughout the week until Friday, 18 November 2022, focusing mainly on the Vaal River, which is across the front of the said lodge. Various role players from the SAPS, as well as members of the public, assisted a lot with the search using a variety of technological methods. It was in the morning of 22 November when his vehicle was found inside the Vaal River, shockingly at an area that was thoroughly searched earlier during the week, from 14 November until 18 November. After the vehicle was recovered from the river, the body of a man was found inside the vehicle, and then it was later confirmed through dental records to be the body of Mr. Willem Kruger. The probe by the police has been ongoing, and an inquest docket was opened as everybody was made to believe that Kruger drove himself into the Vaal River. Through further investigations, it was discovered that Mr. Willem Kruger did not drive himself into the river, and police also learned through investigation that the vehicle's gear was found in a park mode with its handbrake pulled up. The car keys were not found in the ignition, and all of that raised some eyebrows among members of the investigation team. Police are convinced that Mr. Kruger, as well as his vehicle, were not inside the Vaal River during the week when a search was conducted. Well, it therefore appears that the police suspects that Willem's death was foul play for the following two reasons. They had previously looked for a truck in an area where it was found, and it wasn't there. And no one can drive a truck into a river with the handbrake on, the gear in park, without the key in the ignition. Now, later in this video you will see that the truck was already spotted on Friday by a drone, as well as by a sonar scanner on the Monday, the day before it was found. You will also see how, with the help of GPS tracking data, how we can construct a highly plausible scenario of how the truck could have ended up in the river while it was switched off with the handbrake on. Now, on social media, various other arguments have been advanced to support the allegation of foul play. Firstly, apparently the truck does not show enough damage, as one would expect from a truck that had been resting at the bottom of a fast-flowing river for 9 days. There was a wire fence and a gate which would have prevented the truck from floating to the place where it was found, and the fence and gate would have damaged the truck, and no such damage is evident. The inside handle of the driver's door was broken off, as if it had broken while Willem tried to force the door shut during an altercation with someone. That the flip-flop, lip balm, a flask and a toiletry bag were found near the site is considered suspicious, because if these items had ended up in a river on Sunday morning, the floodwaters would have washed them much further away than the 800 meters where they were found. Furthermore, it is argued that Willem was already dead before he ended up in the river, because the autopsy report identified the cause of death as only a possible drowning, and it did not mention that there was water in the lungs. It appears that Willem suffered a head injury before his death, with bruises on the back and the front of his head, with internal bleeding to the right and left of his skull base. It is argued that these injuries were a result of an attack on Willem, and that this was the cause of his death. At one stage, Willem's family asked Advocate Gerry Nel from AfriForum to conduct an investigation. Here is a press release issued by AfriForum, and I will post a link to it in the description. Now, AfriForum came to the following conclusion. After a careful study of the circumstances surrounding the death of Willem Kruger, AfriForum's private prosecution unit believes that under available evidence, allegations of foul play are unsupported. Now, prominent private investigators also came to the same conclusion, and the private pathologist appointed by the family, Dr. Simon, was of the opinion that drowning should be considered the primary cause of death. Now, to the best of my knowledge, Willem's death was not attributed to the head injury. So on one side, we have the police and their followers, and on the other hand, we have AfriForum and other experts. Who's right and who's wrong? To shed some light on this, in this video, I want to examine some critical questions in order to get answers that are based on common sense, logic, provable facts, and where possible, scientific principles. The first question: is it possible for someone that has been drinking in the pitch dark while raining very hard in an unfamiliar area to miss a sharp turn and to by accident drive towards the river? I don't think anyone, in all honesty, can say that that is impossible. Someone on social media said that Willem did not drink at all. Now, that's not true. There are plenty of photographs going around of Willem holding alcohol while socializing with his friends. According to people that attended the stag party, Willem did drink, but apparently not too much. To have a few drinks at the bachelor's party is certainly common, and there's nothing wrong with it. And I'm not making any allegations that Willem misused alcohol or that he misbehaved that evening. Even if he only consumed 3 beers that evening, and his blood alcohol content was at the legal limit of 0.05%, this could still have affected his abilities in these extremely difficult circumstances that morning, with the rain, the dark, and the unfamiliar surroundings. Please take note of this here: slow response to emergency driving situations. So the alcohol, even if he consumed just a moderate amount, could have impacted his reaction times. When Willem left the bar just after 1 a.m., it was apparently raining very hard. Now, all of us has driven in heavy rain, and we know how the rain can reduce the view, especially when it is dark. Raindrop diminishes the light that reflects back to the driver's eyes and can also cause glare, which can cause visual discomfort. And even then, in such difficult circumstances, a driver's reaction time will also be slower than usual, and it will take a vehicle longer to stop due to the reduced skid resistance on wet and muddy surfaces. Assuming a reaction time of about 2.5 seconds and a speed of 40 kilometers per hour, it would have taken Willem about 48 meters to stop after he first noticed something that may be a danger. Now, given that the distance from this turn to these trees are about 50 meters, Willem would have already been in a very dangerous situation immediately after he missed this turn. Now, there are other things that Willem could have done in the truck that could have distracted him. For example, maybe he played around with the wiper settings to get the wipers at the right speed to manage the water on his windscreen. Now the question is Even if he did see these trees, would he necessarily have identified them as a danger? Or maybe did he confuse these trees with these trees? He may have had a vague memory from earlier the day that he drove in through a number of trees, and he got them confused. Now that I've shown that it was not impossible for Willem to have made an error in judgment, the question is now, are there any indications or signs that something like this happened? On Thursday, November the 17th, 2022, after floodwaters have started to recede on a Wednesday, the owner of the lodge noticed this damage to a caravan stand located on the river bank. He is convinced that this mark and this damage were not there before the flood. Furthermore, wheel tracks as well as spin marks were noticed on the ground next to and leading up to the paved area. An expert from Pretoria, who specializes in the reconstruction of accidents, was asked to examine these marks, and this investigation took place on the Saturday, November the 19th. The expert concluded that Willem's truck could have made these marks and could have caused this damage. And in this photo, the water level here is much higher than it would have been when these marks were made. Now, in my first video, I explained why it's unlikely that the floodwaters would have washed away the wheel tracks. Today I want to talk about the black marks, the tire mark that you see on this little pillar. Now, I played around a bit in Google Street View in probably one of the wettest cities in South Africa, Cape Town. And in this view was taken in April 2022, and you can see the black mark on this curb here, presumably made by a tire. And then 6 months later, after a very wet winter, the mark is still there. And then 10 months later, in February 2023, the mark is still there. So it's quite clear to me that these marks don't wash off very easily. Now, something I was not aware of before is the truck actually did not enter the river directly, but that it stopped and got stuck in the mud on the river's bank. There are marks showing where wheels spun in the mud. It appears that somebody tried to back out, but the wheels couldn't get enough traction to climb back over a concrete curb. Now the next question is, what evidence is there that the wheel marks and the damage were caused by Willem's truck? And to answer this question, let's look at the data obtained from the truck's GPS tracking device. Apparently the truck was equipped with a car track device. Some of you probably have similar devices in your vehicles and therefore know what I'm talking about. With such a device, and with an app on your phone or from a website, you can actually track the real life position of your vehicle. You can also look at the trip history, where your vehicle was the previous day or the previous week, etc. And you can actually track other information such as when the truck was switched on or off. There are other things that this can also do, so I would recommend that you go to the website, have a look around and see what this can do, and perhaps even how you can buy one for yourself. So to install this device, it's connected to your vehicle's diagnostic port, and then it is typically placed together with all the wires behind the dashboard. So it's typically not easily accessible. And I don't know exactly where this was placed in Willem's truck. But because Willem had such a tracking device in his truck, there is information that can be used by the police to determine exactly where the truck was at any time, and even when it was switched on or off. And the police had this information at their disposal. So what does the tracking data show us? It shows that at 1:08 a.m. Willem switched on his vehicle and started driving. And at 1:12 a.m. it shows that at this position the truck was switched off. And it seems likely that during the 4 minutes, the following happened. He drove away from the parking lot, he missed the turn and went onwards to the river. He drove over the caravan stand, he got stuck, he tried to reverse but couldn't get out. This is also consistent with an eyewitness who said that he or she saw a white truck that evening spinning its wheels in the mud. After he switched off his truck, it is then that he decided to call his friend, most likely to ask the friend to come help him. It was the missed call. His friend did not answer the phone because he was asleep and the phone was in silent mode. Then 2 minutes later, at 2:14 a.m., Willem tries to call his friend again. Again it was the missed call. The friend did not answer the phone and Willem did not leave a message. Now the police claim that these two calls did not take place at all because they do not show up on his phone records. Now I'm extremely surprised that the police do not know that missed calls will not appear on a phone record. The presence of missed calls on the friend's phone was confirmed by investigators. Furthermore, the tracker data shows something very interesting, that the truck stood still in the same place on the bank of the river for about an hour until 2:17 a.m. At this time, the truck was switched on again, and it idled for about 1 minute until 2:18, when it was switched off again. Now one can assume with reasonable certainty that at this time, after he switched the truck off, he would have pulled up the handbrake and put the gear in park. About a minute later, the GPS signal was lost, most likely due to water damage. It appears that the car track device wasn't waterproof. After that, there is unfortunately no further information available as to what happened with the truck. Understandably, there will be many questions about what Willem did in that hour between 1:12 and 2:17, while the truck stood still in the bank. I will talk about this a bit more in my video later. Now, starting at about 3 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, it started to rain very hard in the Ermelo district, upstream from where the resort is. At the resort itself, it only started raining hard just after midnight. Now, during this hour that the truck was switched off, one of two things could have happened. The water level gradually rose until it was deep enough for the truck to start floating, or a flood wave came down the river and the water level increased suddenly and unexpectedly, leaving Willem with no chance to save himself. With a flood wave, the water level can rise very quickly, sometimes in a matter of seconds. Now, these sketches show what the flood waves look like, and you can see how quickly the level would have increased. Now, flood waves can be very rough, and Willem, who was found without a seatbelt on, could have been thrown around in the truck, which could explain some of the injuries to his head. Now that we can say with some reasonable certainty that Willem's truck is into the water at approximately this location, the next question is, would it have been possible to float the 65 meters to the location where it was found? Firstly, the most likely route would have been along the middle of the river here, and it would have avoided the fence and the gate entirely. A route over the fence and the gate absolutely makes no sense. Even if the water did extend this far, the water would have been shallower and not as fast, and then the truck also had to make like a sharp turn around the street to finally get to the location it was found. It's a fact that vehicles can generally float in the river and then it will gradually start to sink. And how quickly it sinks depends on how quickly water seeps into the cabin. This in turn depends on several factors, such as, for example, the water tightness of the doors, whether the air vents were open or closed, or whether the engine on or off, and how watertight the pedal and the transmission system openings were. Now let's look again at this video of a truck that floats and begins to sink in a flood. So it starts off fairly level, and then you see how the front slowly starts sinking into the water. What's interesting to note is that at this point the battery should already be submerged underwater, but the windscreen wipers are still going. Now I tried to do some research to the best of my ability to determine how quickly a truck or any vehicle sinks in a river like this. And the best information I could find was between 30 and 90 seconds. Now in Willem's case, if we assume that the river was flowing between 1.5 and 2 meters a second, it would have taken his truck between 30 to 45 seconds to float the 65 meters to where it sank. Now the big question is, if the window was broken before the truck went into the river, i.e. by the supposed killer, would it have managed to float to 65 meters? Or would it have sunk much faster and over a shorter distance? Now this is a difficult question to answer, and I've thought a lot about this. I've tried to do research, I looked at a lot of videos, and in my personal opinion, I think the truck would have sunk much faster and over a shorter distance if the windscreen was already broken by the time the truck went into the water. And to me, this just indicates that the only person that could have broken this window or the windscreen was Willem. Now if you look at this video, it's evident how quickly a vehicle can sink to windscreen level. Here you can see him trying the door. He couldn't open it. And you can now also see how quickly the water got into the cabin. In the description I will post a link to this video and of other videos that show how vehicles sink and how to get out of a sinking vehicle. It appears that Willem's phone and smartwatch were quite waterproof. The cell phone data connection was lost at 3:25 AM and his watch went dead just after 3. It appears that the battery continued to work until about 3:17, and that's when the GPS device lost its power. Before someone says that the battery cannot work under the water, yes it can, as long as the water's conductivity is low. Gradually the battery will lose power as water seeps in and mixes with the acid inside the battery. So what other indications are there that the bakkie was there all week and wasn't planted there the Monday evening? As we already know, the windscreen of the truck was already broken when it was found. So it's possible that loose objects in the cabin that could float escaped through the open windscreen and then floated away in the flood waters. On the Wednesday, 3 days after the incident and 6 days before the truck was found, a flask that belonged to Willem was found. The next day, on the Wednesday, they found a flip-flop and a lip balm. Apparently, on the Monday, they found a toiletry bag. These objects were found about 800 meters downstream. Now, there may have been objects that floated away much further than the 800 meters and that were never found, and there may have been objects that just sunk to the bottom of the river fairly quickly. Now, the argument that comes up often is that if these objects escaped from the truck, the floodwaters would have washed them away completely and not just 800 meters further. The yellow line in this image is about 800 meters in length, so the objects were found in approximately this area. I would just like you to note all these willow trees growing on the bank of the river. Now, floodwaters in a river do not flow uniformly in a straight line, and the velocity is not uniformly constant from side to side, from shore to shore. And the cross-section of a river is not constant either. And there can be many obstacles such as trees and structures that can alter the flow patterns of the water. All these factors together with the increased volume and velocity of flow can lead to the formation of eddies or recirculation zones, as you can see in this picture. And this create the opportunity for objects to circulate back into the shallower areas and to make its way to the shore. This video just shows this principle on a small scale. In the middle of this flood, the water is flowing very quickly, but here on the shore you can see the water is much calmer, and take note of these little waves that can easily deposit an object on the bank here. Now, even if recirculation wasn't a factor, it is possible for the flip-flop and other objects to become entangled in the branches of trees that hang in the water. Look, for example, at this photo. What would happen if the water were to rise? Now all of a sudden, these branches would become obstacles in which objects can get entangled. Now let's look at the condition of the truck. It's constantly said that the truck does not show enough damage for a vehicle that has been resting on the bottom of the river for 9 days. There are a few factors that we need to consider. Firstly, when the flood was at its highest, the river was about 4.5 to 5.5 meters deep to the roof of the truck. Secondly, the area around the river is mostly empty agricultural land, and as such, there would not have been many dead trees and branches that would have washed into the river. And if there were indeed a lot of debris, it would probably been very dangerous for the rescue workers to ride their boats on the river. And even if there were debris, they would have just floated over the truck. There was nothing floating deeper than 4.5 meters that would have damaged the truck. And then we also need to remember that the deeper you go into a river, the slower the water flows. Right here at the bottom and the sides of the river, the velocity of flow is 0, and then it increases to a maximum just below the surface. Now, what one can expect at the water at this depth is plant material. In the Vaal River there are apparently many invasive plants that grow in the water, which I presume can break off when the river flows very fast. Now, because the water content of this material would be fairly high, they would not necessarily float on top of the river, and it would be dispersed throughout the water. Now, in this photo we can see all kinds of plant material that got stuck to the truck. And remember, according to the police, this truck has only been in the water for a few hours, most likely less than 12. Here one can see how over time plants have got entangled around these headlights, and how under the relentless flow of the water, this plant material here got stuck in the slits and crevices around the lights and the hood. Here we have a combination of plant material and muddy water. It's of course possible that over time, while it was standing on the bottom of the river, this material could have entered through the windscreen, as well as sediment could have accumulated on the inside. Does this look to you like a vehicle that has been in the water just a few hours? So what do we have so far? We have GPS data that places the truck on the bank of the river where wheel tracks show someone drove and got stuck. We have objects that were in the truck, which were found along the river a few days later, after the floodwaters began to recede, and long before the police said the truck was placed in the river. And then we have the condition of the truck, which look like it has not been in the water for just a few hours, but certainly longer than that. Now the big question is, why couldn't the first search party find the van? The police said that they thoroughly searched the river from the Monday to the Friday, and that they used all kinds of technology, including magnets, sonar, drones, and night vision equipment. Now, in my previous video, I talked about the shortcomings of some of these methods. But ladies and gentlemen, the police are not telling us the whole truth, and I have no idea why. I'm not saying it's intentional. It could be that the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. The fact is that the drone already spotted something in the river on the Friday in the exact same position where the truck was later found. You can definitely see that something is going on here. Now on the Monday, the sonar of a private fishing boat pointed to the same spot, as it did again on a Tuesday when the rescue workers from Gauteng arrived. That is why they start to search in this particular area. I've answered many questions here today, and now it's the police's turn to answer a few questions. And I know the police don't owe me anything, but I think they do owe it to the public. How do you think the truck was hidden for 8 days, knowing that a GPS tracker places the truck on the bank of the river between 1:12 and 2:17? Did someone come to tow the truck out and to get out of the resort without being detected by the CCTV cameras? How was the truck brought back to the river, and how was it placed in the river, knowing that the rear wheels couldn't roll? Are there any eyewitnesses? Are there any marks? How do you think that the flip-flop, the lip balm, etc. got into the river if it did not escape through a broken windscreen? If you believe it was placed there by someone, do you have any evidence? Do you have any eyewitnesses? Why do you say that the truck was not in the river until Monday night, while the drone already picked something up on the Friday and the sonar picked something up on the Monday already? The truck was probably thoroughly examined by forensic experts. What is the level of corrosion and oxidation, especially around the battery and the electronic components, tell us about how long the truck has been in the water? Now let's talk about what Willem could have done in that hour that his truck stood still on the riverbank. There is of course no certainty as to what he did, but I'm going to go with what in my opinion is the simplest and most logical scenario. And it is that he decided to sleep right there in his truck for a few hours, then to sort out the problem with the truck in the morning, when his friends would be awake and when the rain may have calmed down. Now apparently Willem did sleep in his truck from time to time, so this would not have been the first time. At that time, the level of the river was much lower and it did not present a danger yet, and Willem simply did not expect that the water level would rise so high so quickly. Now when the truck began to float and was tossed around by the floodwaters, Willem woke up. As anyone would do, he immediately started up the truck and likely tried to reverse out again. When that was successful, he did the next best thing. He switched off the truck and pulled up the handbrake in an attempt to prevent him from sliding or floating further into the river. At one point he tried to open the door, and that would not have been possible under the circumstances. It looks like he may have tried to kick the door open, hence the damage to the inside door. Then he tried to break the window. He might have tried a key. It's common knowledge that a sharp object can break a windscreen. It might not have been the best method, but under the circumstances you would try anything. You could also have broken the window by kicking it out with his feet. However he did it, it was too late, and the water was too high and it rushed in, it overwhelmed him, and the truck quickly sank to the bottom. Now I know there are probably many of you that are already thinking about how Willem could have been murdered during that hour. Let's look at one possible scenario, one of many. After he left the bar, he got involved in a fight, and in the process his truck's door got damaged. He then quickly sped off. He missed his turn. He accidentally drove over the caravan stand and got stuck. After trying to reverse out, and after trying to call his friend, and that didn't work, he decided to go and look for help. He got out and walked back to the bar, where he again got involved in an altercation. During this altercation, he sustained a a head injury, and he lose consciousness. The person or persons that he fought with decided not to get help, but rather to murder him by putting him back in the truck and then to push him into the river. It's probably not impossible, but where is the evidence? No one ever came forward that there was an altercation. No one ever came forward that Willem came to ask for help because his truck got stuck. Some people underwent the polygraph test and they all passed. No deception detected. Just because there were damage to Janneman's truck is not proof of murder. He explained that he had scraped the mirror against something as he drove from the bar to his chalet in pouring rain. The dent in the door was already there from 2 months before. The damage to Willem's truck is also no evidence of murder, because this damage could have happened in the river or during the rescue attempt. The head injuries are also not sufficient evidence that Willem was murdered, because they could have been sustained inside the truck when Willem drove over the caravan stand or later when the truck was being swept away by the floodwaters. An empty bullet casing in a parking area is no evidence of murder either. Even if you mix all these things together as you should with circumstantial evidence, it still doesn't paint a picture of murder. Now many of you are probably wondering why the police would have changed this case to a murder case if they did not have the evidence. That's a very good question. But where is the evidence? It has already been a month and a half since this article appeared in the report, and so far the police have not yet produced the irrefutable evidence they claim they already had, and no charges or arrests have been made yet. I can understand that the investigation is still ongoing, but why then did they do the press release? This is the police's reason for a press statement. It must be noted that the police received a lot of calls from concerned members of the public who were keen to know the status of the investigation. It is from this backdrop that the police deemed it fit to share on the progress of this investigation of the case, which has drawn a huge interest from the public. Now, given all the information that points to an accident, such as for example the GPS data, and the total lack of evidence that the truck was removed from the premises and brought back 8 days later, the police's press release makes no sense whatsoever. Now, during the AfriForum investigation, there was a private investigator who apparently fabricated evidence against certain persons to make them look like suspects. Apparently someone paid this private investigator very well. Now, AfriForum accused certain police investigators of misconduct and of attempting to mislead the family. They were also concerned that the police did not want to investigate the private investigator and his falsification of evidence. Maybe the wallet got opened again and the private investigator and others are back to their shenanigans. That's all for now, ladies and gentlemen. I'll keep digging, and if anyone has information about what's going on here, please email me at molletmedia@outlook.com. Your identity will always be strictly protected. Thank you for your time. Until next time. Bye.